Hello, ndidinga uthetha nomntu.
Cancer Association, good day. Melissa speaking.
Hello, ke qeta ho fumana hore ke na le lefu la mofetshe.
To help people who are desperate. You know, it's such a reward for us, but also a blessing for the public. Just from a point of view that, you know, there's someone that they can still talk to. Even if it is just for something as simple as, I'd like to know where I can maybe get a wig during this time. Or I really do need to speak to somebody because I can't deal with my diagnosis.
Ik is Loesel Kibero. Ik is 51 jaar oud. Ik is al in 1998 de eerste keer gediagnoseerd met kanker.
We'll be offering an appointment-based counselling service for patients, any new diagnosis or anyone who's got an existing diagnosis but is maybe looking for help. We'll extend our services as well to loved ones, family members, any parent of a child who has cancer.
So sabona ba le service ngayi service ebalulekileyo kakhulu ebantwini bangavele bafone and then balufumana uncedo from telephone.
Kom ek sê vir die mense, tel op die telefoon. Tel dit op. Jy weet nie wat aan die ander kant van die lyn gaan gebeur nie. Praat. As jy nie gaan praat, gaan niemand weet wie jy voel nie.
Omdat ons kankerpasiënte se immuunstelsel so laag is hulle hoë risiko en hierdie telefoniese ondersteuningsdiens bring dan ons ondersteuning vanaf die kankervereniging van Suid-Afrika tot binne in die huis van ons pasiënt.
So sifuna bonke abantu bakwazi ufikelela kuthi ngelanguage zabo abazithethayo emakhaya.
Dit gaan baie beteken vir die pasiënte, want dit beteken dat CANSA die grense van dorpe gaan wegneem.
We are there to say that cancer cares and that they're not alone.
Bazofumana uncedo abaludingayo.
You make that choice. It's not an easy choice. It's going to be challenging, but you can.
We've always done counselling face-to-face. We've got our support groups. It was a talk that telecounselling was something we wanted to do, and lockdown just helped us get us there faster because we saw how people needed it. Good afternoon and welcome to Cancer's Honest Talk about how we're feeling about lymphoma. My name is Melissa Zyman. I am the Cancer Marketing and Social Media Coordinator. And this year's World Lymphoma Awareness Day, which is on the 15th of September, CANSA is joining with global networks of lymphoma patient organizations to help lymphoma patients as well as CLL patients have honest conversations about lymphoma, how they're feeling, and to reach out to those around them. I'm joined this afternoon by a wonderful team. We have Avril De Beer, who is a social worker, Peter LaRue, who's an Imago clinical therapist, as well as a business and life coach, Denisha Mahangi, who's a lymphoma survivor who will be sharing her story with us, as well as George Simatopoulos, who is a caregiver to a lymphoma patient. And then from CANSA, I'm joined by Lorraine Govender, the National Manager for Health Programs, and Gretchen Minar, who is our Services Manager for Psychosocial Support. And then we're also lucky to be joined by Kumbasile Gomede, who is a PR intern who's working with our health promotions team, and she's from the Durban University of Technology. So I'd like to thank all our speakers here today, as well as everybody for joining. And I hope that we are going to have a wonderful conversation today. You are welcome to pop any questions in the chat, and we will have some time during the webinar to attend to those. But for now, I'd like to hand over to Lorraine. Lorraine will be presenting the findings from the Lymphoma Coalition's patient survey. So Lorraine, thank you very much. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for that introduction, Melissa. So World Lymphoma Day is celebrated every year on the 15th of September. The Cancer Association is a member of this coalition, and we're quite excited to share some of the findings that were carried out during a recent survey. So this survey was an international survey, and South Africa was also part of it. So the feedback that's being shown today will also include feedback from the people in our country. Quite interestingly, the topic that we chose and that we're going to be talking about, which is honest talk. So this survey basically tells us what people have been saying about their lymphoma diagnosis and why we want to emphasize the importance about talking about our feelings. The survey showed that 67% of people living with lymphoma said they had experienced emotional effects in the past 6 months. And this was according to the global survey. And if we look at the stats that is shown here, so some of them, in terms of the diagnosis and treatment, 20% felt that they were isolated. 27% of people felt anxiety when they heard of their diagnosis. And then 35% experienced depression. And then if we look at the stat here, 46% of people feared relapse or progression. So the fact that our patients have identified these factors as being something that's worrying them, we can't help but ask the question, why are we talking about our diagnosis? Why are we experiencing this? So these concerns can be addressed when people talk about what they are feeling and experiencing as well. And often we find that people are not talking about it, or they want to talk about it, but they don't have the resources to be able to talk to people about it. So 30% of people experience depression, definitely didn't have a chance to talk to the doctors. And when you think about anxiety, you know, the diagnosis that you receive and the fact that you are now worried about it, are you able to talk to someone about it? And that's 28% of people said they experience anxiety. And then if we look at fear of a relapse or progression of the cancer diagnosis, 27% said this is what they felt. So again, we're asking, are we talking about it? Because these questions and these fears can be addressed if we talk to people. Now, if we look at the caregivers, remember, it's not only patients who are affected with a diagnosis, it's also the people who care for our patients that have an effect, that the diagnosis will have an effect on. So when carrying these challenging feelings, it can be hard, very hard to focus your attention on someone you love, someone who's been diagnosed with cancer. And 91% of caregivers definitely experienced emotional effects during the first 6 months of the diagnosis. So in our talk today, we're going to be stressing on the importance of honest talk and why we need to start talking about our diagnosis. And so I'm now going to hand you over to Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. I'd like to welcome Gretchen, who will be kicking off our discussions for the afternoon. She'll first be chatting with Avril and Peter. Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you, Melissa. We are extremely honored and privileged to welcome our esteemed experts, Peter Leroux and Avril de Beer. Both are highly regarded in the field of hematology, psychosocial support. A little bit on Avril. Avril de Beer is a dedicated social worker at the hematology oncology practice and stem cell transplant unit in Pretoria. And over the 8 years, Avril has presented various CPD courses to social workers and nurses. And the focus is on the needs of people living with cancer, especially hematological cancers, the psychosocial aspects thereof, and the complexities of stem cell transplant. Also privileged to have Peter Leroux. He is an Imago clinical therapist, also a qualified business and life coach. Is also an integral part of a hematology practice in Gauteng. Peter is also a cancer patient survivor himself. He was diagnosed with leukemia in 2014 and underwent chemotherapy as well as a bone marrow transplant. His personal journey fuels his passion for human development, and he believes that strong relationships are crucial to achieving success in any endeavor. We are grateful for your presence, Avril and Peter, and we look forward to your valuable insights. We'll dive right into it. We'll start with Avril. We know that when cancer patients are being diagnosed with cancer, they do experience emotional reactions that include fear and anxiety, depression, shock, and disbelief. Avril, in your experience, what are the most common emotional and mental health challenges faced by lymphoma patients? You're muted, Avril.
Sorry, Gretchen. I think being diagnosed with lymphoma or any other cancer is a life-changing experience. It affects every aspect of your life, your emotional health, your relationship, your work, your job, your marriage, your ability to work, your finances, and your plans for the future. It also changes your worldview. You're a person who believes in the good of life, and suddenly you are diagnosed with cancer and you don't really know why. So people often have these feelings of uncertainty and of guilt. People sometimes feel it's their fault that they've got cancer, and it's usually not their fault. So they experience these emotions of sadness and anxiety and fear.
So, Avril, when they turn to you then for support, what strategies do you use to support patients then to cope with these mental health issues like anxiety and fear and uncertainty?
There are quite a few things that I use. In the first place, for me, what is very important is to make sure that the patient has the relevant information. So at every stage of their cancer diagnosis, they must have the information, because if people have the information, they get a sense of control, because people feel helpless when they are diagnosed with cancer and they don't know what's going on. People often tell me, it's my first experience of cancer. No one in my family has had cancer. So they feel helpless. It's very important to give them the proper information so that they don't feel so helpless. And then also, we do give counseling. It's important to give counseling to the family and the patient, to involve the family. Also, there are techniques that you can use with patients. For example, breathing techniques. The people who are attending this webinar, they can Google box breathing. Box breathing is a very effective technique. And there are many patients who do journaling. There are patients who actually have a diary where they detail every step of the way of their treatment. It also gives people a sense of control. That it's not just the doctors who have a say over my treatment and my life. I'm recording everything to make sure everything is as it should be. So that's one of the strategies that we can use. It's also important to look at the spiritual aspect. Some people, meditation is good for you. Some people prefer to meditate. Others prefer to pray. Exercises like yoga is good for you. And also to take a rest from social media, not to be on social media every day, to make sure you get proper rest, to sleep.
Thank you, Avril. And we know it's so important to talk about these emotions that the patient is experiencing, and to navigate through that emotions, being negative or positive, but having somebody to talk to.
It's very important to deal with the emotional stress, because research has shown that the emotional stress of a diagnosis can affect people's ability to cope and also to comply with the treatment plan. So most big oncology practices do have social workers or counselors available. And if you are getting treatment at a government hospital, it's also important to ask for a social worker to get involved, or to ask for a social worker to be seen by a social worker. If you do not ask, you're not going to get the specific support. Also, even at the big cancer practices, there are lots of patients, so you need to ask, because you and your family, you need the support. You can get the support. You need to ask for it.
Thank you, Avril. And it's so important to take control of this journey. If it's not being offered, do your research, know who's the resources in your community. We'll speak a little bit the resources later. When I looked at Peter's short bio, 2 words stood out for me: relationships and connectedness. And that's also so important, because if you're isolated, and not only physical isolated, but also emotionally isolated, that can also add to the stress that you are already experiencing, Peter. How do you involve the family and the caregivers, Peter, in this psychosocial support process?
Thank you for this opportunity, and just welcome to everyone who's here today. It is of immense importance that we look at people in the sense of their relationships. Professor Dan Siegel defines a human being as the embodied brain, your psyche, which he says is the mind, the spirituality, and the emotional part, and then your relationships. So many times in cancer and in cancer treatment, immediately what is focused on is just the body and just the diagnosis and just the illness. But we need to remember that that person is in relationships, and there are other people that are in relationships with them. And the first thing that we do is to try to give people perspective, that there's the world of the patient and there's also the world of the caregivers. It does come together at a point in time. And to also help people understand that there's a part of the patient's world that the caregivers will never understand. And there's also a part of the caregiver's world that the patients won't understand. Simply put, a patient can say, I'm fine, but the caregiver, in their eyes, they're like, I'm worried, I'm still worried about you. And it's to give them that insight that both worlds exist and both worlds matter. And both worlds need to be looked at, the world of the patient and the world of the caregiver. So that is the first part, is to give that perspective. And then the second part is to really help people to understand the concept of self-care. It is important for caregivers. So sometimes caregivers go through 3 different phases. The first one is caregiver fatigue, where they start feeling, you know, I'm also tired. I can't do all of this. I can't handle all of this, but I need to handle all of that. And it's really to step into that phase and to go, but you know what? It's not just the right thing to do to look after yourself. It's the wise thing. Your cup needs to stay full in order to be there for the patient.
That's so true, Peter, especially when a patient gets diagnosed with cancer. We don't know how long the journey is going to be. Is it going to be 10 days? Is it going to be 10 months? Is it going to be 10 years? And how is this going to impact the work-life balance of the caregiver? Peter, I'm sure that you have a lot of resources to share with us on how our our caregivers or resources that are available for lymphoma caregivers that they can access?
I'd like to add to what Avril said about information. Information and education is so important. That is one of the things that we really need to focus on, is to educate people. Because very often when a diagnosis like lymphoma is given, what people do is I've never heard about this, I don't know what this is, and then unfortunately they jump to Dr. Google. And they go there and it's like, what does Google say? What does Google do? And Google doesn't always give you the correct and reliable information. So it's really to educate people in the sense of what this is with reliable, trustworthy information. Then the other thing is to help them realize that they are not alone, that there's a lot of different ways that people can do this. There are support groups. There's wonderful programs like CANSA does with the there's various options. There are social workers. There are counselors. Even in the spiritual community, there are a lot of ministers and pastors that really that have a heart for this kind of work, and that understand that cancer is a different kind of beast. It's not just a normal thing. Exactly like you said, it might be 10 weeks, it might be 10 months, it might be 10 years. No one knows, and it's a prolonged journey, and they understand it. But the support is there. One of the gaps is sometimes in practices, the doctors focus immediately on the illness because it's important. I mean, we have to deal with this. We have to deal with the problem. But the problem is the problem. First, look at the person and see the person and go, what does this person need? What type of care does this need? Very, very simple. As a caregiver, for example, you're allowed to have that hour or 2 hours off once a week where you just go and sit with a friend, have a good cup of coffee and a piece of cake, and just almost in a sense have a normal life, to recharge your batteries, to recharge your energy in order to keep on caring for the patient or your loved one.
Thank you for touching on that, Peter. That's also so valuable. So we do get medical teams that don't focus on the emotional part of cancer lymphoma. And Avril, you are part of a multidisciplinary team. So I would like to know from you, Avril, how do you collaborate with medical teams? And Peter, you can also jump in. How do you collaborate with medical teams to ensure that there is comprehensive support that includes psychosocial support for cancer patients? Patients is not always going to request doctors for it. And we know as a social worker, as a clinical therapist, you have to play the advocate role. So how do you ensure that there is comprehensive support at the end of the day?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. Every week, every Monday morning, we have a meeting where all new patients are discussed. And I play the role of the patient's advocate at that meeting to make sure that patients are seen, they are given the necessary emotional support, their families are given support, they are given the necessary information. It's important for doctors to know that they must always look at the emotional aspects, and not just the emotional aspects. This whole family, not just the patient. What are the financial needs? What are the emotional needs? Do they live far away? Do they need assistance? The patient is part of a bigger world with the employer, the family, the spouse, the children, to give that emotional support, especially if a patient has a child or children, to make sure that support is given, to make sure that you give the patient the necessary information that they can inform their children about the cancer. It's always difficult for patients to do that. And I provide them with the necessary information. I also give them printouts to show them, and I explain to them how to inform their children about this diagnosis, because this diagnosis is life-changing.
Thank you, Avril. Anything to add, Peter?
That was very valuable. What we do from our side is we've got an introductory talk with each new patient. And it's literally what we just do is it's an introductory talk. It's where, and the first thing that we need to do is we need to listen. Listen for exactly, are there financial concerns? Are there social concerns? Are there kids involved? Very often there are elderly parents involved. For example, if you are in your 50s and you get diagnosed with lymphoma, you might have a mom and dad or a parent in their 70s or 80s. How do you approach that? So the first thing is really to listen. And then the second thing is we need to network and we need to take hands together. So if I hear that there are kids involved, I refer to a child psychologist, which I know can handle that. There's just for example, and this was quite a funny story. Quite a while ago, we had a lymphoma patient, and she was Portuguese speaking. And I was starting to get very close to them, and I needed to stay objective. So I called this Portuguese speaking psychologist to talk to her. And during that time, when I said to her, but don't tell her you're a psychologist, just tell her that you are someone from the hospital going to come and talk to her. And she said, oh, is she one of those Portuguese ladies? So it's understanding and it's bridging the gap between the patient and their needs. And we can do that through network and taking hands. It's absolutely bridging the gap.
Thank you, Peter. And yes, we do know that private sector are more geared with comprehensive support. Unfortunately, our patients at the state hospital, public hospital sector, they are not always accessing those services, and it is time for honest talk. So as experts in your field, what improvements or changes would you like to see in the current support system that will be available to all lymphoma patients?
Well, I would like to see that all lymphoma patients have access to a social worker or to a counsellor. I know that's going to be very difficult in the state sector, in the public sector. But what I would also advise patients to always take someone with them, to write down a list of questions and concerns, so that when you see the doctor, the oncologist, you are totally overwhelmed. Then refer to your list, and also your emotional concerns. Doctor, is this a life-limiting illness? What is my prognosis? Because some people are too scared to ask that. And in keeping with our theme, honest talk, if you want to know these things, ask the doctor. Write them down beforehand and ask. And take your emotional support partner with, because that person can also be your advocate, reminding you and also asking the doctor what is needed.
Thank you for that valuable information, Avril. That patients should ask the questions if they're not able to. A family member can always ask the questions on behalf of them if they are allowed to also join the session with a doctor. Peter, from your side?
I think CANSA's, your motto actually sums it up pretty much what needs to happen. Research, educate, and support. It's in that, and it's still that. The educational part is so important. That is making people aware of this illness and what it entails and what it is and what is happening with it. the more we can give people awareness about exactly what it is, the more people will be and have a knowledge of actually what to do. And then the last part of your motto, support, that is still crucial. My dream is that one day that there will be a counselor of a form or shape in every oncology practice in this country, not just in private, but also in state. People giving their time, people who have gone through it, people who have experienced it, maybe a family member or a caregiver who has gone through it and now wants to give back. There are incredible resources that you can do and that people can go through and that they can equip themselves in order to help someone else. At the end of the day, we're not just dealing with an illness, we're dealing with a person. And I think you mentioned it, I believe that there's full aliveness and connection. We bring a different kind of aliveness when we support, when we help, when we care in this hectic thing, what we call lymphoma. So we bring the care that's needed.
Thank you, Peter. Looking at the patient mind, body and spirit. Thank you, Peter and Avril, for joining us today. I know that you have busy schedules, but we would like more hours and time with you because there's so much more to know. I'm handing over now to Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Avril.
opportunity of being here. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Lorraine, before we hand over to Peter, I see Lorraine's hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Peter and Avril mentioned. We fully understand that the resources in the public sector is quite drained. But I think what we really want to appeal is, to bring in more partnerships, more of the private sector to actually support the programs that we run, whether it's with Avril, Peter, or, any other organizations that are involved in supporting patients. We really need their support. And, Gretchen, we've actually seen through grant funding how this can help patients, so we're able to bridge the gap that currently exists in our system through our public-private partnerships. And that's so important, I think. And I think we really need to get them on board. And that's, pharmaceuticals and other grant funding programs that can support us. Thank you.
May I add to that, if I've got time? And this is what makes a thing like today so important, the honest talk. We need to have honest conversations as well with pharmaceuticals to tell them, not just that sometimes I feel that it's the pharmaceutical companies and we kind of like have the soft voice. We need to have a stronger voice to go, but this is where you need to direct your money. This is where you need to direct funds. This is where you need to direct things in order for us to. You, as a pharmaceutical company, you say patient care is our most important aspect. Okay, so how does that patient care look like? This is patient care in a holistic sense. And that's one of the definite hard conversations and honest conversations that we need to have.
Thank you, Peter. And Melissa is going to handle the question section of the program. I'm not sure if we have any questions in the chat box.
No, we actually don't have any questions at the moment. So I'd like to encourage everyone to, definitely pop any questions that you have in the meeting group chat. Even if we do now move on and, you've got something later, we can always come back to Avril and Peter as well. But then, since we don't have any questions at this stage, Gretchen, I'd like to hand back to you. And I just want to also say thank you again to Avril and Peter. That was great information. But now we will be hearing some real stories from Denisha and George. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Melissa. We are also excited to welcome two very, very special guests who will be sharing their unique perspectives, both from experiences, both from a patient and caregiver's perspective. Our patient survivor is Denisha Mahingi, a determined and resilient 30-year-old from KwaZulu-Natal. Denisha is a qualified teacher who displayed incredible strength and dedication by sitting for a BCom exam day the day after receiving a chemotherapy. So that's speaking about the resilience, Denisha. And our second guest is George Stamitopoulos, a businessman based in Gauteng. George's journey is deeply personal as his daughter was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma at the tender age of 14. George has not only supported his daughter through a battle with lymphoma, but also managed to balance his demanding professional life. So we are looking to hearing from you today, George and Denisha, about how you coped during these challenging times. And your stories of courage, resilience, and hope will definitely inspire and provide valuable insights to us all. So we'll start with our session, and it's about emotional support because it is so necessary, emotional support as well. Denisha, 86 years old, being diagnosed with lymphoma. How did you manage the emotional stress and anxiety associated with a lymphoma diagnosis?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Yes, being diagnosed at 36 years old, being diagnosed with lymphoma, like any other cancer diagnosis, is complicated, confusing, and nuanced. It's like the road ahead is full with uncertainty. And I didn't know what was going to happen. Like everyone's journey is so personalized. So it's not even like you can compare your journey with somebody else. I, like every other patient, experienced anxiety, fear, even a sense of isolation. And everything just became so overwhelming. Even though I completed treatment in May, I still battle with feelings of anxiety and fear. What if the cancer comes back? Am I going to die? And these are genuine questions, and these feelings are okay. They're okay to feel that way, but it's not okay to let those feelings sort of control your life. We need to focus more on being positive, because as a person who likes to be in control of everything, there's certain things in our life that we cannot be in control of. So during my diagnosis, I had this newfound faith where I leaned on having faith, on surrendering to God, and just having hope. I think hope is so important. I also dealt with these feelings by speaking to my loved ones, although they did not have professional guidance to provide me with. But the simple fact by saying, you know what, it's going to be okay. That's all that I needed. I needed someone to tell me it was going to be okay. And I'm so grateful for CANSA South Africa, because I got in touch with you over the phone. You helped me. I've also read books. What I did was I tried to maintain normalcy in my life. So when I had chemo and I felt good the next day, I went ahead and I did my walks. I did painting. I went to the mall. I had coffee. I did things that I did before diagnosis to give me a sense of normalcy. So that's what I did to feel normal. I listened to music, I leaned on my faith, and that's what I did.
Thank you. Thank you, Denisha, for sharing that. And we can see that you are a person that is taking control of the things that is happening to you, the things that's coming your way. And sometimes the response to things that are without our control is the only thing that we do have. And it seems that you almost managed to work a little plan on who is going to be your support system, what the resources are you going to access, your spiritual beliefs also came into play, Denisha. You also spoke a little bit on your fear of losing your hair, because that was also a fear for you. How did you manage that stress on the fear of losing your hair?
So the day when I got diagnosed and the doctor told me that I had lymphoma, I didn't know what lymphoma was. Then she had to tell me it was a cancer. I don't have anyone in my family who had cancer. So all I know in my head, chemotherapy, you lose your hair. So I asked the doctor, am I going to lose my hair? And she said, yes. I consulted a few other doctors and they all said yes. And that to me was devastating. I did not think of anything else except losing my hair at such a young age. To me, it was absolutely, I could not handle it. So when I started treatment, a month after that, my hair started coming out in bunches, and it was so heartbreaking. It was so heartbreaking to the extent that I went back to the doctor and I told her that I don't think I can complete this treatment. I can't lose my hair. And she's like, no, we discussed this. It's something that you should be prepared for. Although, yes, we did discuss it, but I was not mentally strong to accept that. I could not handle it. But by the grace of God, by some miracle, I still have my hair. I completed treatment in May. It did thin significantly, but I do have my hair, and I'm so grateful for that, because for me, that was my breaking point. Every time I went into the shower and I saw clumps of hair in the shower, that was my breaking point. And I don't think I would have been able to handle this diagnosis like the way I did had I lost all my hair. So everyone's journey is so personalized. And to me, I'm just grateful that I was able to handle it. And a big part of me being able to handle it was the fact that I had my hair.
Yeah, that's so true, Denisha, because it's also a change in your body image. And cancer, for a lot of cancer patients, there is changes in their body image. And it's about grieving about your body parts, your body image, and coming to terms with the new, I almost want to say the new person. I know that we've also touched a little bit on caregivers, because if something happens to a patient, it definitely has an effect on the caregivers. We learned that in systems theory. If something happens to A, it will have an impact on B and C. If you're living in the same house, if you are part of the same family, George, from a caregiver's perspective, when a patient hears the words, you have cancer, they have emotional responses. As a person, as a caregiver, what emotional responses did you experience when your daughter was diagnosed with lymphoma?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Gretchen. To answer the question, 14 years old, you know, I don't think she could comprehend what it meant. She's obviously seen stuff on television, and then you obviously think the worst. As a parent, we didn't really know what hit us, because cancer happens to other people, never happens to you. You know, and that's the reality there. We never think our kids will get sick. We never think we can get sick. So that was a quick lesson in life, to know that, you know, you are not untouchable. So effectively, in the beginning, we were all over the place. You wanted to have information overload because you're trying to assess the severity of the situation. So you're taking up a lot of information. It can be dangerous because everyone's got an opinion. Dr. Google, as Peter had said, if you rush to that, you're trying to do your own assessment. The doctors kind of assured us that, it should be good if the treatment is highly successful, especially in children, but you don't believe it, So, so my suggestion to people are stay calm, have belief in the doctor, stay strong to your religion, and try and be basic about what's going on and who you integrate and listen to, which could be dangerous because you don't know where to start and where to go. But a very important thing, and I think Avril and Peter both mentioned it, is that from the onset, from the beginning, start counseling for both the patient and the caregiver. Because you initially go into a survival mode where the cancer and the treatment of the cancer is the priority. So you don't care about anything else. You don't care about the feelings. You don't care about the stresses. You don't care about that. But by not dealing with that, sooner or later, those will pop up and will add extra pressure, not just on the patient, or in this case with my daughter, but on the family, on the father and mother. My daughter happened to be an identical twin. So there was a huge feeling of guilt on her twin sister. That's why she's sick and I'm not sick, And by not addressing that initially, put a lot of pressure because you tend to want to be strong for each other. Even the patient. My daughter wanted to be strong for us because she felt bad that she's putting us under the stress. She was very unselfish in that way, which kind of indirectly also put pressure on her. Because in an off day, she couldn't really say to us she had an off day. She wanted to stay strong. So only at a time later on in the process when we realized that she's actually reaching out to us to say, I'm not always so strong. She kind of wrote a diary and we gave it to us to read. That we actually realized that we need to address the mental side of it. But not just her mental side, our mental side as well. And once we did that, the picture changed. We kind of released and we all became human again instead of trying to show this body of strength, because you're going to have your good days, you're going to have your bad days. So I would say to all caregivers that are listening to this, get help, mental health from the beginning and for the patient, and then start addressing it. Like the patient with the hair loss, for example, there's a mental journey that has to happen because that's going to have to be addressed whether you lose your hair or not. We never addressed it. Thankfully for us, our daughter found strength from above. But she made the call and took ownership and said, she'll cut the hair. She'll cut it off before it all falls out. She made a big thing. She invited the whole family over and she took ownership of it. And she was brave enough to say, shave the hair off. And it was like the family was there and we were all crying. She's the only one smiling for photos. And then she got that. She became a superwoman that day. But I'm sure for other people, it's a physical proof of the condition you're in. And it can be, I think it can be very traumatic. So before you even go there, go and get help. How do we approach it when this happens? And there's not just the hair, there's many other things that happen. People that have had cancer will tell you no chemotherapy, and this is very good advice I got. No chemo session will always be the same. The after effects differ. Either she's tired, she's constipated, or she's nauseous for a few days. We had chemo yesterday. It was a 10th session out of 12. and she slept. She slept from yesterday afternoon. I left home up at 10 this morning. She was still sleeping. So, but then again, at 12 o'clock midnight last night, she asked my wife to make her a big plate of food. Where normally the previous session she was so nauseous she didn't eat for 3 days. Now she wants to eat. So I'm saying there's so many different things that happen, and you kind of got to get your mindset right. And sometimes we can't do it on our own. Religion has been a very strong supporter for us and as a family. And then speaking to someone that could just help us from outside. How to deal with these stress situations.
And we also see that every day as social workers, when there is a cancer diagnosis, the patient is worried about the caregivers. I don't want to burden my husband, my siblings, my parents. The patient has their fears. We also see it from the caregiver's perspective. I'm so tired. I don't have the energy. I still have work to do. I'm also worried about the patient, and the caregivers also have fears. George, what has been, and I know that you and your daughter also took control of this journey, only 14-year-old, losing your hair in a stage where your identity is so important for you. And your image, I'm sure that there has been a lot of challenges for you. What has been the most challenging part of this journey for you?
I think, so when she started, so we took her out of school because we wanted to isolate with the chemotherapy immune systems. We didn't want her to be infected at all. In order not to stop the regime, the timeline. She's getting chemo every 2 weeks. So one of the challenges was obviously her being out of school. Now you can imagine she's got a twin sister. So she's thinking, I'm going to fail school this year, and I've got a twin sister that's a year ahead of me. So her level. I mean, she was even joking in the beginning. She would say, she's got more fear of not passing this year than beating cancer, So that was a challenge. She's only returned to school last week. Thankfully for us, in our case, is that she was diagnosed to have 12 chemotherapy sessions. After the 6th session, they did the PET scan and the lymphoma had disappeared. She had 6 lymphomas around her heart and lungs, between 4 and 6 centimeters each. So that was massive stuff. If you look at the scan, it was almost half of the chest was covered in lymphoma. That had disappeared after 6. The challenge then now is going through this chemotherapy and how you feel. We could not stop the treatment. She had to still continue. So from 7 till 12, she's knowing that actually the lymphoma has disappeared. The mental challenge was, why do I still have to go through this punishment? Because chemotherapy is very hard. Denisha was probably attest to it much better because she's felt it. I've never experienced it, but that is a very hard thing to have to motivate yourself to knowing how you're going to feel for the next few days. And I think that's probably the most challenging thing. Taking her there, and we had a week ago, she was meant to go for a treatment. She was mentally not in a state. She was tired. She had gone to school for the first time in 5 months. She was there for 2 days. And that obviously took a lot out of her. That the day of the treatment, she wasn't mentally strong to say, listen, I'm going to go through it. And she asked if we could just postpone it until yesterday. So it's her body. We give her that power, even at the age of 14, for her to make a decision. We'll support it. So that's probably one of the most challenging things, was motivating her to go now for it. She's got 2 more to go. And then, please God, then we finish with this
And she's so grateful, George, to have such supportive parents, especially a dad that is there holding a hand throughout this journey. A tough businessman who's motivating his daughter. Denisha, I want to turn to you because you almost struggled, if I can put it like that, to being diagnosed with lymphoma. You underwent several tests. You saw a lot of doctors. You're privileged. You are part of the private sector, and you did have access to those doctors. You demanded access, if I can put it like that. What has been the most challenging part of the journey for you?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I did have access to the private sector. And while we're on the topic of mental health, sometimes even being part of the private sector and trying to access help from counselors proves difficult in itself, because I can identify to so much what George has said. Like, I had to be strong for my mom and my husband who was taking care of me. And when I did manage to get access to a counselor or the counseling nurse, her intention was good. You know, like she says, you should expect nausea, you should expect your skin to darken. And that actually made me more scared, because I did not want to go into chemotherapy knowing that this what could happen to me. You know, I don't discount that it happened to others, but I'm here to write my own story. I want to experience it for myself. And thankfully, I went through my 12 sessions of chemotherapy, and everything for me was very, very manageable. And just like George mentioned, after my 8th cycle, I went for my PET scan, and it showed that the lymphoma in my chest area has also disappeared. So then I also thought to myself, why do I now have to complete 12 sessions? Because I'm done. But unfortunately, you still have to complete those 12 sessions. And yes, it took me 1.5 years to get diagnosed, 4 biopsies, to eventually get diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. So the challenge is not only in the public sector, it's also in the private sector. So it's so important for patients to advocate for themselves. You know, if you're feeling something, and sometimes the doctor might tell you, no, it's just a flu, or it's just in your head. No, it's so important to advocate for yourself, because you know your body better than anyone else. And I was even misdiagnosed at one point with TB. So I could have, you know, if I did not listen to my body and if I did not pay attention, I could have just took the TB tablets thinking that I had TB, because I was diagnosed by 2 doctors with TB and I did not have TB clearly. So it's so important to advocate for yourself. And also, I think doctors need to be more empathetic. I think we need to see doctors as being human. You know, sometimes they come across as being so clinical, which I'm sure they have to do that because, you know, they need to take care of us, give us medicines. But I always say, you know, medicines heal illnesses, but doctors heal patients. So it's so important for doctors to identify their patients. What are we dealing with? If the patient needs a bit of emotional support, the doctor should be available for that. We're not saying it's a doctor's job to counsel the patient, but I think there should not be a one-step approach for everyone. Doctors should treat patients depending on their needs. Like some patients are more concerned of their mental health, you know. So I think doctors should be supportive, and it's very important to be empathetic. That's my feeling.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Because we know that patients are not always being referred to social workers and psychologists for the emotional support. Before I go to my next question, I see Lorraine has a hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add to what Denisha said, and it's so important. We work in cancer, with education and screening, and then we also see our patients that come through, after diagnosis has been made. And just to the people that are attending the webinar today, so lymphoma is a cancer of the blood. And, it's often misdiagnosed, as Denisha mentioned. And because the symptoms for lymphoma are so alike, like TB, that it's often misdiagnosed. So I think what Denisha is also saying to everyone that's here today is, when we say advocate, we also saying listen to what your body is saying. And this is so important, because your body always tells you that there's something wrong. And we all at the Cancer Association, we also tell people, please, if you need to go for a second opinion, please do that. And it's not because you don't trust the doctor, but because you also want to be sure of what you have been told. And if you are still experiencing symptoms despite the medication that you're going and that you are taking for TB or any other infection, if there are persistent symptoms, you really should go for a second opinion. Third opinion or fourth opinion, because it's your life and your life matters. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Lorraine. Denisha, so I would just like to know what advice, coping tips do you have for lymphoma patients? And George, I would also like to know what coping tips you have for lymphoma caregivers. Denisha, we can start with you.
So for lymphoma patients, the advice that I would give, because I use, is that try to maintain a sense of normalcy if you can. Try to go out on walks, try to become spiritually inclined, try to speak about your feelings to your loved ones, listen to music, go on long drives, and most importantly, practice gratitude, because we may not be able to control what is happening to us, but we can be thankful for so many other blessings in our life. And if today is not a good day, that's okay, because everything will pass. Tomorrow is another day. Just take it one day at a time, and it will be better. It will be better. There's always believe in that and have hope. That's my advice.
Thank you, Denisha. And George?
Denisha's spot on. She's 100% right. Try and don't make too much of a big thing as a caregiver to the patient. Try and create a normal life. Obviously, there's a lot of dietary restrictions we had, for example. Certain things my daughter couldn't eat because of fear of bacteria, nuts, biltong, the stuff that she used to like. So you try and be normal, and that was a bit difficult for her to just decide not to, she couldn't have those meals. So it's a bit of an adjustment. But yeah, the religious side of it is important. The mental side is the most important side, because that's what you can control. You can address that. The medication got in the cancer, it's handled by the doctor. The stuff that you can control, do it from the beginning. None of us are designed to be able to handle this high stress situation, either as a patient or a caregiver. As a father, you obviously are, you killed anyone for your children to protect them, and the frustration of not being able to help was a bit of a story for me to deal with. But like I say, if the caregiver and the patient starts talking and gets help, it will make the journey, I would say, easier, but you would know how to deal with it instead of trying to work it out yourself, because it's a little bit out of your own control. Except your faith, there's no other way for you yourself to try and deal with it. You would need to speak to somebody. So speak to someone. Your health is just as important as the patient's. Because you are the support system. When that patient is not feeling well, you need to keep it strong. But there will be days where you are the weak one and the patient is strong. So both or whoever the caregivers have to be just as strong as the patient and vice versa. You almost live with each other. So yeah, that's short and sweet. Go and get help from the beginning. Don't try and sort it out later. Because then you have to unbundle quite a few issues that have happened up until that time.
Thank you, George. George is also part of our WhatsApp support group for caregivers, and Denisha is also part of our WhatsApp support group for women with cancer. And it's just that safe space where you can share and share your concerns with people who understand the journey, with your fellow travelers. So that is also so important. I'm handing over now to Melissa Lorraine for the question section of this.
Lovely. Thank you very much to Denisha and George. I'm sure that you've touched everybody on the webinar today. But yeah, just a reminder to all the participants, if you do have any comments or questions, please pop it in the chat box for us and we will get to it. I see that we do have a question that's just come in now. If we can just address that quickly. It's from Dexter Jumo, and he says, listening to both Denisha and George, there seems to be a great need for cancer coaching as a gap. So it's more of a comment, but thank you, Dexter. And I'd like to ask the panel if what they'd like to respond to Dexter's comment.
I agree with Dexter. There are a few health coaches out there in South Africa, but I think there are very few and far between people who can support you on this journey. But that is also something that costs a lot of money. So it's not, even if you have a medical aid, as far as I know, the medical aids don't pay for it. But a family member, a trusted family member can also be your emotional coach, who can help you on this journey. As I think lots of people said today, you don't need to go alone. You don't need to, this whole journey of treatment, you don't have to experience it alone, because you cannot. No one can do this alone. You need support, emotional support from your family, your friends, your colleagues, and the psychosocial support that is offered by the practice, or in this case of state hospitals, by the social workers there.
Thank you, Avril. I know sorry, Peter, I see that you've got going to add. Awesome. I'll hand over to you.
I think it needs to become very practical. George mentioned it, and he touched on a subject that, again, it's the two worlds of the patient and the caregiver, and it's just to start talking to each other and understanding each other's worlds. For example, the cancer patient doesn't always want to talk about it because you live with it. You live with that diagnosis. It's inside of you. The lymphoma is inside of you. You carry it with you. On the other hand, the caregiver also needs to have information. They are worried. They want to know what's happening. They want to know what you're feeling. So one of the ways that we suggest is have a coffee moment. Have a coffee moment each day where you make a nice cup of coffee. I'm a coffee snob, so that's why I said coffee. But you can make tea or whatever. And you just sit across each other for 15 minutes and we talk about it. What I'm feeling, what your concerns are, what your worries are, what your questions are. And then after that 15 or 20 minutes, it's done. So then the patient feels I can go on with normal life, and the caregiver has the information that he or she needs. That's important and I think that's the essence of today, honest talking. It's just to start talking to each other.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much about that. I'd like to welcome Kombisile Gomede, who is our PR intern from the Durban University of Technology. She will be chatting to the group, and she'll actually be addressing our audience in isiZulu. So, Kombisile, over to you.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you very much, Melissa. Ngizoqala ngokuthi iyini lymphoma. I-lymphoma umdlavuza wama-lymphocytes. Amasotsha omzimba amhlophe asiza ukulwa nezifo. Ama-lymphocytes atholakala oketshezini okuthiwa i-lymph oluhamba emzimbeni wethu wonke ku-lymphatic system. Izinhlobo ze-lymphoma zimbili, khona i-non-Hodgkin lymphoma ne-Hodgkin lymphoma. I-non-Hodgkin lymphoma ihlasela kakhulu abantu besilisa, i-Hodgkin lymphoma ihlasela abantu kakhulu abesifazane. Kule minyaka le kubonakala ukuthi ukuhlobana kwe-lymphoma ne-HIV and AIDS kukhulu kakhulu. So abantu abane-HIV yibo abasengcupheni kakhulu yokuthola i-lymphoma ngesizathu sokuthi uma une-HIV amasotsha akho omzimba aba weak, ngaleyo ndlela ayahluleka ukuthi ayahluleka ukulwisana nezifo ngoba asuke weak. Kanti i-lymphoma siyibona ngani? I-lymphoma siyibona ngeempawu ezivamile kakhulu, ukuvuvuka kwendlala. Le ndawo le ela ngasemkhimbeni. Ukushiselwa nokugodola. Ukuvama komkhuhlane, ukuphathwa umkhuhlane. Ezinye impawu zayo, inhliziyo emnyama ungakuthandi ukudla. Ukutholakala ukuthi manje uqaqanjelwa kondlala le ndawo le kade sengikhuluma nawo, ukukhwehlela nokuba nephika. Impawu ze-lymphoma zivame ukubonakala kwezinye izifo ezingekho bucayi njengomkhuhlane nezinye izifo ezingamahlala khona esingayibala. Nakulaba abaphuza utshwala, mutho ukuthi uma uphuza utshwala uzwa kubuhlungu le ndawo lezi. Ngaleyo ndlela leyo usuke kukhombisa ukuthi le ndawo le isi-affectekile, ngaleyo ndlela ukuthi kumele usheshe ubone umtholampilo. Ngokwanda kwe-lymphoma umzimba ukuhamba uphelelwa amandla. Ube umuntu ophelelwa amandla, ube nezibhocobhoco. Okay, okubalulekile kakhulu ukuthi uma uphethwe umkhuhlane uya kadokotela ukuthi okay. Okubaluleke kakhulu ukuthi uma uphethwe umkhuhlane uya kadokotela ucheck le ndawo lezi amakhwapha, i-lymphatic system, amakhwapha ila emphinjeni kanye ne-groin ilo. Yebo. Bese ukuthi u-CANSA unayo i-counseling system eba online, zikhona iy'namba zakhona. It's a support system, counseling online, i-available, itholakala kwama-languages awu-7, isiZulu, isiXhosa, i-Afrikaans, isiTswana, isiSuthu. Ngiyabonga. Thank you very much, Melissa, for the opportunity.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Kumbasile. Yes, it's actually great that, we can reach all different audiences with the information and the resources that we have. So thank you very much for sharing that. We've had a comment come in during when Kumbasile was chatting, and I'd like to open it to either Denisha or Gretchen. where it comes from Nayiso, and Nayiso says, my biggest takeaway is creating normality. I'm finding it difficult for my mom and husband to understand that I need to continue with life outside of going for chemo and being at home.
Melissa, I'll start. So it is just to reiterate what Peter actually said is I hope I pronounce it correctly, is to understand the viewpoint from both parties, where the parents are coming from. And as a parent myself, you only want to protect your children. So your parents, Nayiso, do have your best interest at heart. And they are protecting you. So I think if you have that talk with them, tell them you also wish to go out with your friends from time to time. You are not currently busy with treatment where you need to isolate. And it's also important, and it will do you good to be surrounded by other people as well. So I would like to encourage you, Nayiso, to have that honest talk with your parents and share your feelings with them.
Hi, Nayiso. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but here I hear you, and I think it's so important to find to live normally. You cannot let this diagnosis impact or define your life, but it's also important to speak to your doctor, because my doctor did advise me that it was okay to live my life normally. So it's important to speak to your healthcare provider, and living life with some sort of normality is very important for mental health. If you feel good, go for your walks. My husband was very supportive. He always took me on walks in the evening. Like, I never saw myself as being sick. I did not want to have that victim mentality where I'm sick and I can't do this and I can't do that. If you are able, if you do have the physical strength to go ahead and do your normal everyday things that you want to do, please go ahead and do that, but always get advice from your doctor.
Thank you. Peter, yes, I see.
I think just to reiterate what Tanisha said is that to be diagnosed with lymphoma is abnormal. It's absolutely, and feels like darkness has just come. And that's why it's so important that we need to create a normality in the situation, because life does go on. You are not the lymphoma. The lymphoma is the problem. The lymphoma is the disease, but you are the person. You are rich in experiences. You have gone through previous experiences. You've got capacity, you've got strength, you've got abilities. And it's to focus on all of that in the midst of this.
Thank you, Peter. We also have a comment from Nandeep and Nandea. And Gretchen, I think this actually speaks a lot to you and actually, what we're going to, cover from your side as well. So I think I'll read out the comment, and then maybe if you can go into a little bit of the care and support from CANSA side. But Nandeepa's comment says, I wish this was available when I was dealing with chemo. I just started a new job in a new town during COVID and staying alone when I was diagnosed. God knows I was almost at a point of giving up. I needed support, still do, even after I've been cancer-free for 3 years now. I still get very emotional when talking about it, and I'm really scared that it will come back.
Yeah, and thank you, Melissa. Nandeepa, so we actually started our telecounseling service in COVID. We launched our service on Mandela Day 2020 because a lot of our patients and caregivers were isolated. I heard that Kumbisile was telling the audience a little bit about our telecounseling service because it's available in 7 languages, Afrikaans, English, Xhosa, isiZulu, Sepedi, Tswana, and Zulu. We also have it now available in Siswati and Chonga. And we've just realized that people were isolated in the first place. People were living on their own. They had cancer diagnosis on their own. Loved ones were not allowed to go to the hospitals with them. So we were trying to close a cancer care gap by our telecounseling offering. It's available free of charge. It's a cancer-specific service, and it is manned by our social workers and our counselors. You can access our telecounseling service on our website. You can also contact our toll-free number, 0800 22 66 22, or you can send us an email at info@cansa.org.za. That brings me to our help desk offering that we do have. Also so important, Nandipa. So cancer patients have queries and they don't know where to turn to. So if you have a query, you don't know about a resource, you can also contact our help desk, the info@cansa.org.za, or call our toll-free number 0800 22 66 22, and they will link you to the service offering within cancer. Very important to note also that we picked up that people want to express themselves in the African languages as well. So we do have the WhatsApp lines available for isiXhosa, isiZulu, isiSotho, and isiSwati. And then we also have a WhatsApp line for Afrikaans and English. We do get a lot of referrals via our WhatsApp line. We have face-to-face support groups. We do have online support groups, and we also have our WhatsApp support groups, one only for men with cancer. We have one for women with cancer, our caregivers group, our ostomy support group. So we have several WhatsApp support groups as well. Then we have medical equipment at our cancer care centers, and if I'm talking about cancer care centers, it's actually our offices where we do have medical equipment that is available on loan. We have several online resources. Just to touch on a few, I think one of the speakers said that you have to equip yourself with information. So when you experience a side effect, how can you cope with that side effects? That's part of our nutritional coping tips, dietary tips. That's also on our website. We have our advocacy team. If you need any support with a hospital, or you are waiting, there's appointment delays or machines are broken, we do have an advocacy team that's ready to assist you. And then we also have our care homes, because people have to travel for the treatment. They don't have transport money, and they don't have accommodation. We do have our cancer care homes that can assist with transport and accommodation at a minimal fee. And you can access all of that information on our website, www.cansa.org.za. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Gretchen. I have popped some links to our website, as well as some direct links to our resources and the support groups, and contact details for help desk and telecounseling. So feel free to have a look through that information. We've had a comment come in from Ian Jeremiah. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Tesma, this month constitutes a year since being diagnosed with lymphoma. I've had my chemotherapy sessions, declared cancer in remission in June 2024. Wife was and is very supportive, back at work as normal. Only the grace of God brought me through all the thoughts that went through my mind when I was given the diagnosis news. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. We are almost out of time for this afternoon, but I know we can continue going so much longer with this topic this afternoon. But I'd like to just hand over to Lorraine quickly, just for any last words and thoughts from her side.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melissa. I think, from listening to our speakers and what I want to share with our participants is the importance of being able to talk about your cancer, honestly, to share what you're feeling and what you're experiencing, and not to be afraid of it. Even Denisha and George as well, we're fortunate that they have a good support structure that was able to take them through that journey. And we do know that often our patients don't have that. So that is why we have nonprofit organizations like the Cancer Association to support you. So please take note of the links that have been shared and the resources shared by Gretchen as well. I want to sincerely thank our speakers, Denisha and George, for sharing your journey and your experiences. To our social workers, Peter and Avril, again, bringing you all in, to just tell people that, services do exist. People do exist that can support you. It's so real. And we know with lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is among the top 5 cancers affecting men in our country. And often we know a cancer diagnosis is associated with a lot of stigma. We need people to talk about what they are feeling and what they're experiencing, because no one is going to be able to support you unless you ask for the help you need. To the staff that have supported us here today, Melissa, for all your arrangements. I know it's been your first webinar, but you have been excellent. And I hope this is going to be the first of many more, your coordination skills. Thank you. Gretchen, for bringing on all the excellent speakers. And wow, psychosocial support is the key in a cancer journey after the treatment. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Kumbisile, it's been your first experience as well, and you've done well. We need more people to speak the language of our masses. Thank you so much, everybody, and the participants for staying on. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you to Emmanuel and EP Digital, who made the technical side and the hosting possible. We couldn't have done this without them. But thank you for all the participants and speakers. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, ndidinga uthetha nomntu.
Cancer Association, good day. Melissa speaking.
Hello, ke qeta ho fumana hore ke na le lefu la mofetshe.
To help people who are desperate. It's such a reward for us, but also a blessing for the public. Just from a point of view that, there's someone that they can still talk to. Even if it is just for something as simple as, I'd like to know where I can maybe get a wig during this time. Or I really do need to speak to somebody because I can't deal with my diagnosis.
Ek is Lusel Kibera. Ek is 51 jaar oud. Ek is al in 1998 die eerste keer gediagnoseerd met kanker.
We'll be offering an appointment-based counseling service for patients, any new diagnosis or anyone who's got an existing diagnosis but is maybe looking for help. We will extend our services as well to loved ones, family members, any parent of a child who has cancer.
So sabona ba le service ngayi-service ebalulekileyo kakhulu ebantwini. Bangavele bafone and then balufumana uncedo from i-telephone.
Kom ek sê vir die mense, tel op die telefoon. Tel dit op. Jy weet nie wat aan die ander kant van die lyn gaan gebeur nie. Praat. As jy nie gaan praat, gaan niemand weet hoe jy voel nie.
Omdat ons kankerpasiënte se immuunstelsel so laag is hulle hoë risiko. En hierdie telefoniese ondersteuningsdiens bring dan ons ondersteuning vanaf die Kankervereniging van Suid-Afrika tot binne die huis van ons pasiënt.
So sifuna bonke abantu bakwazi ufikelela kuthi nge-languages abo abazithethayo emakhaya.
Dit gaan baie beteken vir die pasiënte, want dit beteken dat CANSA die grense van dorpe gaan wegneem.
We are there to say that cancer cares and that they're not alone.
Bazofumana uncedo abalulidayo.
You make that choice. It's not an easy choice. It's going to be challenging, but you can.
We've always done counselling face-to-face. We've got our support groups. It was a talk that telecounselling was something we wanted to do, and lockdown just helped us get us there faster because we saw how people needed it.